Hi, everyone. This is Dorie Clark, and I am here. I am on Phil Gerbyshak's show, and I'm the author of The Long Game. And the best advice that I ever received, this was pre-COVID. This was way pre-COVID, was don't get an office because it's so expensive, and the 10 grand or whatever you're going to spend every year on it, guess what? That compounds, and you can save a ton of money. And now everyone agrees with me.
No office ever? So do you have a two-bedroom apartment, or how do you make this work, Dory?
I have worked for myself, Phil, since 2006, and I've never had an office. No, this is what I mean, now my place in Miami, I can actually afford other bedrooms. But now, this is what kitchen tables were meant for, man. This is what nooks were meant for.
So do you have like the world's most comfortable chair, or how do you sit in your lazy boy, or what?
Oh, and couches, like it's so good. It's so comfortable. All you really need is like a decent background for Zoom calls. But honestly, for like the first 15 years of working for yourself, no one was on Zoom calls anyway. So it's not like they could see anything.
That's funny. That's such a good point, right? That we were not like where we are now is not where we were at all. I mean, I think back to, yeah, 2.5 years ago, I was teaching people how to use Zoom because they didn't know how to use it. And now I think most people, like, that's all they want to do is Zoom now. It's so interesting, huh?
Absolutely. Yeah. Now you've got to worry about the whole backdrop situation. But that was definitely not a thing before.
Yeah, for sure. Well, congratulations on another great book. So I reread it over the weekend. I was like, ooh, get some good nuggets. So congrats on that. So how long did it take you to write, Dory?
I'm a reasonably fast writer. I started as a journalist. So, I had been ideating about the book since 2018, 2019, but I wrote the book, basically during the first part of the pandemic. The proposal sold, right at the beginning, like February 28th, 2020
Oh,
was when I got the
wow.
book accepted. And then I submitted the first draft basically right around this time, right after Labor Day of 2020.
Wow. That's really fast. That's really fast. So with that, right, you did that during the pandemic because as a speaker, right, the world shut down, right?
Yeah, there was not much else to do. You needed a hobby of some kind. It was either sourdough or the ukulele or the long game. Take your pick, right?
Well, sourdough takes longer than your book does because, right, you pass it around, you start with the starter. I don't know. I don't get that. I've seen people do that. I'm not the sourdough guy either. And yeah, I have no instruments. And I read books. I've written a couple, but yeah, I love this one. So let's talk about the book because it's awesome here. So one of the things that you said in the book, though, because there's a lot of stuff we can talk about, and that is when you're networking, you say no asks for a year, right? So talk to me about that, and how did that come as something that's worked for you?
Yeah. So the way that I think about this, I mean, you know, if you have taken the time and made the effort to make friends with someone truly awesome, the the worst thing, the thing you don't want to do is to immediately blow up that relationship by, sort of wasting the opportunity by striking too soon and asking people for things that are inappropriate given the stage of your relationship. And what I'm specifically talking about is asks that involve political capital. There, for people who have some degree of prominence, it could be that they're a celebrity, or it could be they're just like a little micro celebrity, but like, it's maybe they are famous in their industry, or maybe they just like know a particular person or something like that. But usually a lot of people are coming at them because they want that thing. And so the fastest way to get exiled to Siberia is to be perceived as yet another person who wants that thing. I mean, if I knew, Phil, that like your cousin was Brad Pitt, right? Let's just start a rumor on the internet right now. Phil's cousin is Brad Pitt. You know, it would be so lame if like 2 weeks after we met, I'm like, hey Phil, my friend has this birthday coming up, and her favorite actor is Brad Pitt. Do you think you could get Brad Pitt to like call her on her birthday or make a surprise visit or whatever? It's ridiculous. And yet people in the professional world do this all the time because they think it's not a big deal. Oh, could you introduce me to your editor? Oh, could you connect me to so and so? But what they don't understand is like 10 freaking people a day are doing this. And so you get immediately tagged as like, oh, another one of those. So that's the last thing I want for anybody. And so I created a rule, which is the no asks for a year rule. Because if you adhere to this, you are actually building a relationship with someone. Of course, it's not like, oh, good, you wait 12 months and then in month 13 you can strike. But the point is that if you legitimately banish thoughts of getting something from someone, you can build a real relationship. And by the time you're good enough friends, it doesn't matter anymore because they want to help you, you want to help them, and it's able to be reciprocal. It just avoids the ickiness of people feeling used because you're pouncing too quickly.
Yeah, that makes so much sense, and I love that. And somebody just cleared up your rumor, by the way. Ben mentioned that Brad Pitt's actually my twin brother. So
That's
I think we are
right.
Siamese twins, clearly disconnected at birth. So I haven't seen him since then, unfortunately, Ben. But if you see him, you tell him I said hi. So that's great, right? So I didn't even know that anybody knew. So that's a little known secret, Dory. Shh, you started it. I'm gonna complete that, right?
I love it. I love it.
Cool. Well, you talked about the building relationship here, but you also say there's three types of networking that we do, right? The short term, the long term, and then the one that I love, it's called the infinite horizon. So let's break those down first. So short term, that kind of short circuits though your don't ask for a year, or is a year a short term? Like take us through these, Dory.
Yeah, so short-term networking is in my definition the way that most people do networking, which I would say is badly. Short-term networking is just like, oh, I need a thing. Let me go get a thing, and it's extremely transactional. And you know what? I'm not saying it never works. Sometimes it works. You go to a mixer and sometimes it's like, oh, I really need a client. And then, you meet someone and like, oh, amazing. I've been looking for someone to sell me insurance. But usually it doesn't work. And B, it's a little gross. Most people don't want to be that way. But they sort of force themselves to because they think, oh, this is how networking is done. So I hate that neediness. I think it's just not how I want to be in the world. And I think when you're on the receiving end of it, you're a little bit like, oh God, it's gross. So I would encourage people, just don't do that. Don't be that way. It's true that sometimes you really do need things, but in those moments, that is not the time to go to new people. That's the time to go to the people you already know who can help you. They're your friends, but not a new person when you're in some dire straits. So a better way to network is long-term networking, which is, hey, I don't know what this person can do for me. Maybe something, maybe nothing, who knows? But they're interesting. They're an interesting person. You like them, they seem cool. Hey, let's just deepen this. Let's see where it goes. That's a lot nicer. It allows things to unfold in an organic way. And then the third category, Phil, that you mentioned is what I call infinite horizon networking. And this is something that is even overlooked, honestly, by excellent networkers sometimes because it doesn't really seem relevant, right? Long-term networking, you might say, well, I'm in the industry, you're in the industry. Eventually our paths will cross, right? For infinite horizon networking, nope. Yeah, they seem irrelevant. That's the thing. A lot of people write them off because the people seem totally irrelevant. You don't have any overlap. They do a weird thing. You don't have anything in common with them. But those can often be the most valuable relationships because they're exposing you to people, to ideas, to concepts that you would never otherwise be exposed to, which can sometimes trigger something really interesting. I'm curious, how do you think about this? Do you have sort of a personal philosophy of networking, Phil?
So I do. I similar the infinite horizon. I guess I haven't considered. Right. I don't short term network. I don't like transactional at all. Everything that I do is built with the long game in mind. Right. I mean, to steal your book title, I mean, truly, that's my goal, right? I don't, I'm fortunate, I guess I don't need anything right now. So I genuinely, I don't ask. I mean, I love having podcasts, right? But I really genuinely want to promote my friends. That's why, that's why you're here, right? That's typically what happens for that. But I will tell you, if we have enough in common, I might try to help them first. I like to deposit first. That's my personal philosophy. I want to deposit, build up the relationship capital first. My friend Rob Peters, may rest in peace. Rob developed this kind of relationship capital idea years ago. We talked about this, and he's like, if you can make 5 or 6 deposits before you ever need to make a withdrawal, you're in a lot better place than if you're like ask, right? Because then you're an asshole, and nobody likes an asshole, right? So that's kind of my philosophy. And then I have the extended. Sometimes there's like a dream out there that I'd love to connect with. So, for instance, Robert Cialdini is someone. Dr. Cialdini is someone I totally admire, right? And as I find people that are connected with him, if I've built up enough capital, I often ask, although I have probably jumped the gun and done the bad asshole thing recently with someone that I didn't know super well. So yeah, but that's my philosophy anyway.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's great. Wait, what was the punchline of that? That you want to get Robert Cialdini on the show, or what is it that you
Yeah,
want?
yeah, oh yeah, that I'd love to interview Cialdini. Yeah, that's the goal, right? Because I've been fortunate, right? I have smart people like you, Tom Peters, Seth's been on the show, Seth Godin, right? But Dr. Cialdini is like my total reach, right? I've got a big, really big interest in his stuff. I've been reading his work for a long time.
Amazing, amazing. Well, you know what? I actually know him well enough, Phil, that I would be glad to try on your behalf. So we'll follow up afterwards, and we'll see how I do. But I do
All
know
right,
him.
cool.
So
Thank you. I honestly didn't know that. So thank you.
ah.
So cool.
Well, I didn't really know about the you and Brad Pitt situation, so we're even.
Right. Yeah. And now oh boy, now we have more people that are believing this. No, this is not true. Step away, Jerry. This is not true, Jerry. So, okay. All right. So let's move back into the book here. So the cult of busyness. We're all super busy. It took us a long time to get together. I know you're busy. I'm busy, but there's a difference between being busy and being effective. So how do we find that white space so that we can be effective without seeming like, like we're just, oh, I'm busy, busy, busy.
It's true. It's true. I mean, I think everybody here, everybody watching probably knows that it is exceedingly easy to fall into the trap of just, a million things to do. You're sort of at the mercy of your calendar. You sometimes barely even have time to go to the bathroom. You're just like, ah, and that's no good. I mean, at the end of the day, you have done a lot of things, but you probably feel like, wow, I literally don't even have anything to show for it. I just had like 14 phone calls. Like, what good was that? And ideally, of course, we all have admin to do sometimes. You got to suck it up occasionally, but in the aggregate, that is not how you want to live your life. Is, not just getting to the end of the day, but getting to the end of your life and feeling like, gosh, what did I really accomplish? You want to try to be aiming at something. And so the first step in all of that is actually getting enough white space to be able to think about what you're doing, to ask some strategic questions, to look at things. I was actually rereading an interesting book that I had read years ago, and upon rereading, I appreciated it even more. By David Allen, the sort of productivity guru, called what's it called? It's called Ready for Anything. Ready for Anything, which is kind of his philosophical take on productivity, and he had an essay in there talking about an insight that actually a client of his had, which is that it's actually not a very large swing that we're talking about, because most people, we of course we overcommit, but we typically don't overcommit in psychotic ways, right? It's not like you are agreeing to do 200% of your actual capacity. You're just a little over optimistic. So you're probably agreeing to do maybe 10% or 20% more than you can feasibly do. And then just on a wing and a prayer, you're like, I can probably get it done, And of course, if you sort of, put on the gas, you probably can sometimes, but you can't do that all the time. But the interesting thing is that it's really about a 10 or 20% swing, because if you're doing 10% more than capacity, you're operating at 110% all the time, you probably feel pretty miserable. You feel pretty run down. You're always behind. You're never getting it done. Whereas if you are 10% under your capacity, if you have a 10% margin, you feel like the king of the freaking world, because all of a sudden you got time for everything. You can do everything you want. You can ask questions. You can do it with leisure and confidence and ease. And so it's not that we have to reclaim all our time, it's that we need to reclaim just a little bit of time in order to have a lot more control and make better choices.
So okay, so we do that, right? And I love that we don't have to completely chuck our schedule away, right? I'm not looking for half time here. I'm looking for 10%. That's good. But you also talk about the 20% time. Now, does that count in with the 10%, or how does that work, Dory? I'm curious because corporate folks often are like, well, I don't have any time. I'm overscheduled. So talk to me. Now we're asking for 30%. What's this?
That's right. I know there's so many percents floating around here. So yes, it is true, Phil. In my book, The Long Game, I talk about the concept of 20% time, which was popularized, made famous by Google a number of years ago, where they historically have encouraged their employees to allocate 20% of their time. Now, theoretically, the 20% of the time is part of your regular work duties. But you allocate 20% of your time to more experimental long range projects, right? And so in the early days of Google, this is actually how things like Gmail were invented, which is pretty cool. It's somebody kind of working on a hunch, working on an idea that they're interested in that benefits them and benefits the company. So that's pretty cool. Now, the truth is, if you were an entrepreneur, you have the ability to carve out 20% time for yourself. Most people still don't because even when you do have that power of choice, most of us don't make full use of it. But at least theoretically, you do. It is admittedly harder if you're working inside a corporation. You have somebody kind of watching you, breathing down your neck, how you're spending your time. And so in that case, what I would suggest would be either having honest conversations with your boss and talking about it and trying to persuade them, trying to get them on your side in order to be able to do this, because there are real benefits to it if you can make the case, or even reconceptualizing it as 5% time. I mean, you may not have discretion over a fifth of your time, but you can probably squeeze out around the edges 5% of your time to allocate to interesting projects. And over time, it compounds. And over time, you're actually able to make some real progress.
Definitely, definitely. I wrote my first book in corporate America, carving out that little bit of time. And one of the things that one of your quotes here: "Effort compounds the same way interest does with money," which was a really strong quote, and it really just reminded me that we have to stay focused and committed to that goal to take that 5%, that 10%, 20%, whatever it is, so that we can continue to see progress because momentum works in both directions. If we're
That's
moving
right.
backwards, right, we're headed the wrong way, or if we're stuck, right, inertia keeps us stuck. So I thought that was a really good quote, Dory. Effort compounds the same way interest does with money. I was like, oh, that's good. I dig that. Dig that.
Yeah,
So
thank you,
cool.
Phil. I'm curious, are you allocating 20% time, 5% time, whatever it is, to something now? And if so, what is it?
So, yeah, yes, I am. I'm working on a new idea. I think it's going to be a book called Mindset Brew. So it's all about kind of how to the different things you can think about, different perspectives, just some essays, right? I usually start them on Facebook and then I improve them and I put them out in my newsletter on there. So that works. And then, frankly, then I take my lunch hour to do this. This is kind of part of my 20% time because I figure I've got about a 10-hour workday. So this would be 10% time. I take about an hour for this. And then, right. And I don't do it every day. But the days that I don't do this, then I usually read the book because I commit. If you're coming on the show, I'm going to read your book. That's really important for me. So both of those are my, I guess, 10 to 20% time for me.
I love that. I love that. You are sharpening the saw all the time, man. That's great.
Yeah, certainly trying to. And I think that's possible, to your point, right, for everybody. We just have to be more deliberate about it and more focused and stop being so busy and slow down and really look at what the time we have so that we can really move forward.
Yeah, exactly.
So cool. So with that, you also talk about heads up versus heads down time, and this was really an interesting concept for me because as I'm reading that, I'm like, oh yeah, because I spend most of my life I think in heads up time, and I forget that I have to sometimes put it down. So can you explain that concept for us, Dory?
Yeah, absolutely, Phil. And in fact, it's good timing because I just yesterday sent out an email to my email list talking about this and kind of parsing this distinction a little bit because I've found it so helpful. I first heard about this framing from a friend of mine named Jared Kleinert who was talking about it, and I was interviewing him for my previous book, which was called Entrepreneurial You. And he was talking about, oh, I was in heads up and heads down. I'm like, wait, tell me more. And the basic idea, heads up is sort of, I actually, the image in my mind is always like Punxsutawney Phil, the gopher,
Yeah.
groundhog, where it's like, oh, okay, so when Phil is in heads up mode, it's like, oh, let's see, I've been burrowed under the earth for a few months. Let's see what's happening. Oh, I'm just gonna survey the terrain here. What's going on? Anything interesting? Anything cool? And that's kind of fun, right? For a lot of people, it's like, oh, interesting. Let's learn some things. Let's meet some people. Let's see what's cooking. But you can't live your whole life doing that because if you are trying to get things done, heads up mode is not the most conducive way to do it. You need, at a certain point, to go heads down. You need to stick your head back under the earth and actually start burrowing or whatever little groundhogs do under the earth, because that is how you make progress. That's how you actually get things done. But you don't want to just do that either, because if all you're doing is having your head underground and burrowing, you might end up burrowing in the wrong direction and you don't even know it. You haven't really sort of checked what's up. Maybe the weather is beautiful up in the sky and you don't even know. So what you really need to do in your life and your career is to alternate, to toggle between these two things. Sometimes heads up, sometimes heads down. And as they say, right, the key is the wisdom to know the difference. So we have to just get smart about making sure that we don't linger too long in one particular zone.
Yeah. And that goes back to your point though. If we have the margin to think, we'll have more discernment so that we can pick the right spot to be
Yeah,
heads up or heads down.
absolutely.
Cool. Cool. So Dory, I have to tell you, I love your books and your work is fantastic, right? I've read all of them and I enjoy them all. So is this one, you say this one kind of brings a lot of them together though, right? I mean, that was one of the things at least it felt that way throughout the book, right? Is that you've got some of the entrepreneurial you there, right? I feel like some of the reinventing yourself there was really important, right? And then the whole standout, right? I think that was included there. So but it's so different, and by that I mean I was not. It's really a good. I don't know. I guess a template. Maybe it's the wrong word, but like a framework that we can use to move the ball forward here in the long game. So why do you think, though, other than the fact that maybe they haven't read the book, why do you think more people don't understand that it's a long game?
Well, there's a few factors mitigating against it, right? One, of course, is just basic human nature, and we're sort of wired that if there is a apples to apples choice between a good thing now and a good thing later, well, of course, we want the good thing now, which makes sense, But the issue and the problem, and the thing that most people don't see, is that it's not really apples to apples. It's that it's apples to oranges, and much like the famed marshmallow test, which of course I reference, you can have a good thing now. That's true. But if you wait, you often can have an even better thing. And there are some things that you might want, some life goals, whether it's related to your career, to your family, to your fitness, whatever it is, that in a million years you can never get it now, because fundamentally they take time to build, they take time to grow. They can never definitionally happen instantly. It's something you have to tend over time. And so you're always going to be choosing, if you keep going for the short term, you're going to be choosing this lesser thing, which, might be fine for the moment. But for most of us, we would like, at the end of our career or the end of our lives, to actually really have something meaningful to show for it. And those are things that actually really do take time. And it sucks that they take time. I don't like it any better than anybody else. But if you want that thing, that's the game you're going to have to play. And so I want to just be honest about that and to tell people, all right, man up, let's do this.
Yeah, take the time to do something meaningful. I mean, the heavier the weight or the harder the work, the longer it's going to take. And with that, right, we need our network to help us. That's those long-term relationships. Maybe they can be those force multipliers to help us move through that as we go here.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. So with that, I think the cover was, I'm kind of slow. I missed all the X's here. I'm just like, wow, that's a lot of O's, Dory. But I see X's and O's. So tell us about the cover, because I find it very interesting to see something like this, because it's, again, non-traditional and really cool.
Thank you, thank you. I am super proud of the cover. I mean, not that I can take credit for it because I did not design it, but I am proud on behalf of Harvard Business Review Press of the cover, which I super like and have heard a lot of good feedback about. I'm also proud of me, I will say, because and this is something that you kind of it's important in this equation that this was my fourth book rather than my first book. You don't have a lot of political capital when you're a new author. And so the way that publishers like to do this, every publisher, is they say, here you go, here's your cover. Isn't it great? And even if it's not great, they're like, isn't it great? And you don't really have a lot of choice in the matter, which is painful. So you could scream a little bit, but it's very limited. So in this particular case, originally for the long game, the initial cover concepts that were coming back, I just felt like we're not capturing the book correctly. It was, I won't go into too much detail, but there was a snail involved. Phil, there was a snail, and I was just like, that's not really where I want to go with this. I'm not sure that's the message. And we went through probably about half a dozen iterations, literally by the end of which they wanted to murder me. Like, I think seriously, literally murder. But I knew I was using every last inch of my political capital, and it felt a little dangerous. I mean, literally, the editorial director's calling me like, "You must relent." But at the last minute, as I was holding my ground like Joan of Arc, they came back with this, which I really love, because it's sort of like, it's like a football playbook kind of situation. It's also kind of evocative of tic-tac-toe, which is like kind of a good strategic game. And I was like, oh my god, this, like, where has this been all my life? So I feel proud of myself for holding out for a concept that I thought maintained the integrity of the book, and I feel proud for HBR for despite frightening me with early drafts, eventually coming up with something that I think is really just extremely excellent.
Yeah, I agree. I think it is excellent. I love that it's yellow, and I like, because it's bright, gets your attention, right? It kind of pops off the shelf if you look at the spine, which is fun, and the X's and O's certainly great too. So with that, Dorie, the last question I've got here is about something that you talk about that I personally struggle with, and that is the comparison trap. The shifting baseline syndrome is a tough thing for so many of us, right? Like, I think we miss that. So can you talk about that and explain that shifting baseline syndrome and how that comparison ends up like eating us up?
Yeah, absolutely, Phil. So the shifting baseline syndrome is a term that is used in like the study of biology and ecosystems. I first learned about it years ago in that context, and I was like, oh, that's helpful. That's really good. I'm gonna steal that. So what it basically refers to in an ecological sense is that we are often undercounting or underestimating the level of ecological change, because we are basing it on our own lifetimes. Like, oh yeah, there's a few less birds, but not bad, right? But it's like we're thinking like, oh, how was it 10 years ago? How was it 20 years ago? And the point is, no, idiot, don't think about your lifetime. If you're measuring ecosystem change, you need to look like 200 years before. But like, what? Okay, what was it like before settlers came to this place? And then all of a sudden you can see, oh, it's not like there's a drop of 5%. It's like a drop of like 95%. Like, oh, we should actually be much more concerned than we are. So anyway, the point of all this is that our sense of reference gets skewed, right? And so this I have seen time and again, sometimes in myself, but you certainly hear it from friends, from colleagues, where our baseline actually moves in ways that are not helpful to us. Because, if I went back in time, Phil, and, we go 10 years back and I'm like, hey, Phil, guess what? Let me give you a little report from the future. Let me tell you what you're going to be doing. Let me tell you about the books you're going to write. Let me tell you about the people you're going to get to meet and the things you're going to get to do and the clients you're going to get to work with. And, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, you'd be like, oh my God, that's sensational. You'd be like, whoa. But it probably all kind of seems normal to you now. And that is the case for all of us. We just kind of become ingrates to the universe because we just get used to stuff and we forget. And so I think we need, the point I try to make in the long game is that we have to keep reminding ourselves about that. We have to keep reminding ourselves of what the accurate baseline is so that we can understand and appreciate where we've been.
Awesome. I need work on that. So that's why I wanted to hear about that, because I know that's something that I struggle with. Maybe some listeners and some viewers do as well. So, so Dorie, when you're not writing though, I've got to hear, like, how do you stay sharp? How do you find, your space? Because you're like super multi-talented here. You've got, what was it, a Grammy or an Emmy or a Tony or all of those things, right? One of those, like a Golden Globe. I don't know. You won the EGOT, something like that. I don't know. Right?
Yeah, I mean, basically me and Lin-Manuel, like this, right?
Well, that's what
No,
that's what I was thinking. So yeah,
I was lucky enough. Thank you, Phil. I was lucky enough to be a producer on a jazz album that won multiple Grammys.
cool. That's really cool. I love that. I love that you're super diverse. That you're not just not just a business person, right? That you've got a whole bunch of other stuff. So how do you like? Are you reading anything now, or are you working on a new book? Like, what's going on in Dorie's world right now?
Yeah, well, I am 100% not working on another book because,
Yes. Good.
yes, one of the ways that I want to actually live out like the premise of the long game is I realized, oh, a mistake that I've made in the past with books is just jumping too quickly into the next thing. And so if I want to play the long game with the long game, I need to promote it longer. I need to promote it harder because that's what it takes to kind of, roll the snowball down the hill. So in my case, what that looks like is I am planning to promote this book for 5 years. I'm in year 2 of promoting this book. So I'm just going to continue talking about it and spreading the message about strategic thinking. So that's what I'm doing. But how do I keep myself sharp? I always like to read. I read a lot, but I feel like, gosh, especially this summer, I've gotten almost obsessive about it. Like I'm really, really reading a lot. I just finished a 700-page biography of Susan Sontag. That was a lot. She's so
Wow.
interesting. It was great. The book actually won the Pulitzer, which was excellent. And right now I'm reading the newly released memoir slash autobiography of Mary Rodgers, who's the daughter of Richard Rodgers, the famous composer. Mary Rodgers herself was also a composer, although a little bit less famous than her dad, who did Rodgers and Hammerstein.
Yeah. Wow. Super cool. Super cool. So not business books. I think that's the lesson that I take from that, right? Some biography, some interesting stuff. Really, really cool. So Dorie, I've got on the bottom, right? Folks need to get a copy of the book. You've got a wealth of stuff on your website at dorieclark.com. I was looking for the URL because I signed up for the download before, and then I couldn't find the URL for that. So what's so if folks want to get that kind of pre-work, if they will, to do the long game. Where can they go? How can they do that? And then what's your favorite social channel so that they can actually talk with you?
Yeah, thank you, Phil. I appreciate it. Yes, so you're talking about the long game strategic thinking self assessment, which
That's
is
it.
a yes, it's a free download that folks can have, which is a series of questions where you can fill in that is really aimed at helping you think more strategically about your own life and your own career. And so folks can get it at dorieclark.com/the long game. So hopefully that is pretty self-explanatory, but it's a hopefully I think it's kind of a cool resource and hopefully helpful to you. And in terms of social media, I would say that where I probably spend my most time is LinkedIn. Although I'll warn people, somehow I wish that I had been warned before this. There's actually a limit. There's a limit on the number of connections you can have, so I'm not allowed to have more. But you can follow me rather than connect with me on LinkedIn. So you can follow me there, and then you'll be able to access all the updates and posts and things like that.
Wow. So you've got 30,000 connections. Congratulations, Dorie. That's
Yeah,
incredible, but
you even
unsurprising.
know. Yes, exactly. It's 30,000. That's exactly right. Yeah, I was, when I did not understand there was a limit, I was just like, okay, 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 random person, sure, like, but yeah, that it comes home to roost now.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, thank you for sharing so much. I love the book. The Long Game is fantastic. Check out Dorie Clark more. Go to dorieclark.com. That's DORIECLARK.com. Get yourself a copy of The Long Game and get to know Dorie. She's got lots of great insights. I just want to close with a quote that I mentioned before, and that is, friends, effort compounds the same way interest does with money. Do the work, think long term, be strategic, and get yourself a copy of The Long Game. Thanks, Dorie.
Hey, amigo, thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure.